And we are bang on 6:30. So if you're joining us, welcome. I'm going to give it a good 30 seconds before I actually launch in. So we'll just wait a while. I'm seeing the participants rise at the bottom. Thank you for joining us at Octopus Arms. We were just talking about internally how we launched Octopus Arms during COVID as a way for us all to get together of a Friday night and have a virtual drink, or in fact a real drink. But given that there are now around 45 to 50 of us all around the country, every single state and territory, in fact, apart from, ironically, the ACT, which is where most of our impetus is directed. Anyway, enough about that. I'm hosting from the land of the Arakwal people of the Bundjalung Nation. I'm very happy about that. I'm here in Walgan, Nyathingali, northern New South Wales, and I want and would love to pay my respect to traditional custodians who've looked after these lands for millennia, it seems, and I want to acknowledge that I'm a guest here in this country. Order of business. We've got a packed program tonight. I'm going to hand over to our CEO, Darren Kindleysides, shortly. We'll subsequently hear from three of my colleagues who are the campaign leads, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of their presentations. So if you look at the screen and you see below, there's a Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions from the campaigners, or indeed if you have any technical questions, please pop them in that Q&A and we'll get to them at the end of our presentations. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our CEO, Darren Kindleysides.
Hey, thanks, Phil. Welcome, everybody. As Phil mentioned, we started these gatherings, the Octopus Arms, as a way of keeping in touch internally during the pandemic. But it's been wonderful the last few years to be able to throw open the doors to you, our wonderful supporters, and really just chat to you about what's happening in AMCS world, our campaigns and our forward plans. So look, thank you for supporting us. Without our supporters, AMCS isn't anything. You are the people that put the wind in our sails. You are our lifeblood. I've been with AMCS now for 15 years, as of March just passed. I've worked in marine conservation about 30, so about half of my career in marine conservation has been with this magnificent organization. AMCS really is a decent bunch of people. We work every day helping to get a better deal, a better future for our oceans. And it's a pleasure to share tonight with you, our supporters, but with some of our amazing team here as well. So AMCS itself has been around for 60 years. It's our 60th birthday next year. Across that time, we've been instrumental in driving improvements to how Australia's incredible oceans are protected. We have this rich history, this rich legacy, if you like, in terms of helping protect our oceans. And I have to say, perhaps the last 12 months, more than many, have been packed with achievements. It's been incredible, really, the amount of things we've been able to achieve, how thick and fast some of this progress has come. So for the people that have been tracking our work, we've helped ban gillnet fishing, which is a deeply destructive type of fishing. We helped get that ban off a campaign for 20 years on that issue, banned throughout the Great Barrier Reef. Macquarie Island, which is this penguin paradise, this jewel in the subantarctic waters south of our continent. We helped get an area the size of Germany highly protected in that marine park. So we've improved the situation in terms of single-use plastics with a ban coming in Victoria, and actually incredibly as well, we won an ARIA award. So last year, John Williamson wrote a song for us that won an ARIA award about really giving a voice to the ocean and protecting the ocean. So look, it has been an amazing 12 months. I've got to say, the next 12 months is looking as significant and as important. There are a lot of opportunities, not at the state level and the federal level. I mentioned a couple of examples, but also internationally. I've just come back from the Our Ocean conference in Athens, which is an annual gathering now of governments internationally, scientists, businesses, stakeholders, and it's become really the engine room for driving and encouraging progress globally towards ocean conservation. These big international meetings can be talk fests. This was not one of those. I was actually pleasantly surprised at how much momentum has come out of this meeting. So across the board, governments have committed over $11 billion for new marine conservation initiatives, and things on marine parks, tackling damaging fishing, looking at the impacts of climate on our oceans. So there is genuinely this sense of momentum towards ocean conservation. Across the 30 years I've worked in that field, that hasn't always been the case. In fact, it's often been the poor cousin of conservation on land. But really, the last, say, 5 years, we've seen ocean conservation come to the fore and is starting to bear fruit. That's not a moment too late, to be honest. That is a positive picture I've given you. But the flip side is our oceans face more threats than at any time in their existence, really. For just to illustrate that, there's a fourth global mass bleaching of corals around the world, and within that, 75% of the corals on our own Great Barrier Reef have been bleached this summer, which is a devastating statistic. I think it shows the scale of the challenges our oceans face. I feel optimistic, but we are in a race against time and tide, and as the ambition, the momentum steps up, that must step up faster, because it must step up at the same pace or greater than the pace that these threats are escalating. So, that's a snapshot of how I read things. But generally, there is good progress and good momentum. But it is our role to make sure that our governments here in Australia do what they need to show the global leadership and the leadership here at the national level and state level, so that we are protecting our own oceans, our own big blue backyard. And tonight we've got a focus on one corner of our backyard. That was a segue to beat all segues. We're looking at the southeast corner of our oceans. It really is a very important part, not just of Australia's oceans, but the global oceans. It's a hot spot for megafauna like whales, but also about 80% of the species, the marine species, found in that southeast corner. So bottom part of New South Wales, around Tassie, Victoria, those are found nowhere else on the planet. So that's a significant responsibility to protect those. We lose them there, they're gone from everywhere. So as well as being important for wildlife, the southeast is unfortunately a hot spot for the warming of our oceans. It's the site for some of Australia's biggest fisheries, and most recently there's a lot of focus there in terms of offshore development, particularly for the oil and gas industry. So you have this confluence of importance with potential threats, and so that's one of the reasons we're focusing on that area as an organisation and that area tonight for our Octopus Arms. And we have a feast of my wonderful colleagues to speak to you tonight about the work we're doing in that part of the world, because that work actually spans from some of our oldest campaigns, our marine protected areas, our marine parks campaigns, through to our newest campaign, which is our offshore oil and gas campaign. Now, AMCS has worked for many years to protect parts of our oceans in marine parks, spanning back to the Great Barrier Reef, but we helped get into a marine park in the 70s, through to the national network that Australia has created through the TENS, Macquarie Island, I mentioned a little bit earlier in terms of progress. But this is a big part of our work, protecting the most important parts of our oceans in marine parks, and there's a real focus going forward on how we can improve that network in the southeast. My colleague Adele will speak to you about that in a moment. And then Louise and Kim will talk to you about this newest campaign. But, when I talked about being in a race against time and tide, there's a tide of interest from big business in expanding offshore gas development in particular. Our climate can't afford that. Our marine life can't afford that. And that's why we start up this brand new campaign that those guys will be speaking to you about in a moment. So look, that's the intro for me. That's the snapshot. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you for our support. As I said, we work to protect the oceans, but it's people like your good selves that give us the support and build our mojo up so we can be out there every day fighting for the future of Australia's amazing oceans. Thanks. With that, I will hand to you, Adele, to talk to us about the Southeastern Marine Parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you for that introduction. And hello to everyone from across our vast continent. I'm coming to you from Larrakia land and sea country in wonderful Darwin. There's an image of our wonderful harbour. Fun fact, Darwin Harbour is 5 times the size of Sydney Harbour. So take that, Sydney-siders. And I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this country. Their land extends 50 kilometres inland, but they are saltwater people. In my role, I'm the Protected Areas Manager. I work all the way around the country and all the way down to the southeast. And like all of you, I love our oceans and I'm very connected to our oceans. Australians are coastal people, where 85% of Australians live by the coast. It's our backyard, it's our source of joy, whether it's snorkeling, surfing, walking on the beach, and it's good for our well-being and sustains us. For me, there's a few shots here of how I connect to our oceans. There's an outrigger canoe there. I get out in the water 3 times a week. We get to see dugongs, that's a bit of a treat. And I love going out sailing. That's an activity that I do with my family. It's very exhilarating being powered by the wind. But what's even more so is when you get dolphins riding in the bow of a boat. That changed my life the first time that happened. And just a shot up the top showing that, you know, we come together, spend time with friends and family around our oceans. So it is really part of our identity and important that we look after it. For our well-being, of course, as well as biodiversity and all the animals that we care about so much. So in my role as Protected Areas Manager, I view our waters often through a marine parks lens. So this map shows you Australia's marine parks in our Commonwealth waters. So states and territories manage our waters out to 5 kilometres, and from 5 kilometres out to the edge of the exclusive economic zone is our Commonwealth government managed waters. This map shows our marine parks, quite extensive, and the most recent additions, Darren mentioned, the very southeast corner is Macquarie Island Marine Park, where we had a huge expansion to that green zone. And head all the way to the opposite side of our oceans into the northwest. We have the Christmas and Cocos Keeling Islands all the way up there. So they were declared in 2022, a huge expansion of that green zone there, which is fantastic. But not only have we had success in our Commonwealth waters, we also work across our state and territory waters as well. For example, in October just last year in the Great Sandy Strait Marine Park in Queensland, we more than doubled the areas in fully protected green zones there. So that was fantastic. And as recently as this week, we've seen that Moreton Bay Marine Park has been protected from what would have been a very destructive development proposal at Toondah Harbour. So that's good news for endangered shorebirds as well as turtles and dugongs there. So our Marine Parks campaign is currently done in partnership with Pew Charitable Trusts, and we're very proud of these achievements. So let's take a closer look at the Southeast region and its marine parks, the topic of today's conversation. So this map shows our current marine protected areas in the southeast corner. So you can see it's a very large area of water all the way from the New South Wales south coast through Victoria, across to South Australia and all the way around Tasmania. And this is where most of Australians live. It is where most of the people get the joy from our oceans and the sustenance from our oceans. Now we're just going to show you a very quick film which talks to you a little bit about the values of this area, and we'll show you some of the species that we have there, and then I'll come back to you and tell you a bit more after.
Australia's southeast marine region contains some of the richest, most diverse life on Earth. Here, 3 great oceans combine, creating a huge upwelling of deep, nutrient-rich water. The ocean springs to life. Phytoplankton bloom, and there is an explosion of krill. This creates a feast for breeding seabirds, seals, dolphins, and whales. Much of this marine life is found nowhere else on Earth. If we lose them from the southeast, they're gone forever.
There you go, just a little bit of a snapshot of some of the species that we've got down there and speaking to some of the biodiversity values that we have. For this whole region, despite those high levels of values, only 8% of the waters is fully protected. This marine park network was established in 2007, and it is certainly due for renewal and upgrading to provide more protection. And there is currently a statutory review process happening. So that provides us with an opportunity to increase our protections in that region. The region does face a lot of threats. In terms of climate change, the region's heating at 3 to 4 times the global average. And we saw in the most recent summer, it really got hit hard by those marine heat waves heading into that southeast corner. There is significant overfishing occurring in this area as well. We have Australia's largest fishery by volume and by area occurring in this region as well. And as we'll hear from Louise and Kim in a moment, there is significant pressure and impact from the oil and gas industry. So our aim through the review of this process and working with our community is to more than double the fully protected areas in this part of the country. And as you can see, some of those green areas on that map are very large areas. So the green areas on the eastern side, their width is wider than the Tasmanian mainland. So they're big areas, and we're aiming to more than double the green areas to protect biodiversity in this part of the world. But we are certainly up against some powerful interests in that we're dealing with the oil and gas industry, the country's largest fishery, for example. So we're going to need all the help we can get to run a powerful and impactful campaign to protect this part of the world. So we're expecting a consultation period to start mid-year for this campaign, and at that point in time, we'll be going out to our communities all around the country and ensuring that people have their say, providing submissions so that we can ensure that we have the high biodiversity values in this part of the world protected through this review process. Just before I hand it over to Louise, if you do have any questions on anything that I've presented here, do drop them in the Q&A and we'll get them to them at the end of the session. So I'll hand over to Louise.
Thanks, Adele. So it's, such an advantage to come off the back of Adele's speech as she's given you the values of the place. But before I get there, you've probably noticed I'm dressed a little bit differently to Adele. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Muwanina people in literally richest Tasmania. And today we had our first snow for the year. So hence the Tassie tuxedo as well and truly on, as I have a bit of an evening spiel about offshore oil and gas. So I'll jump into it because I'm going to try and keep it brief, but we've got a little bit to talk about. Currently, as the newest campaign in AMCS, we are very much focused on the southeast, where for quite a few years, it's not been a hotbed of new projects. It's been one of the most established areas for the oil and gas industry. It's where the oil and gas industry really got a start back in the 70s. And then a couple of years ago, suddenly we had a bunch of new exploration proposals turning up, which is interesting, given it's also one of the most tired gas fields in the country. So we've been hotly focused on an area known as the Otway Basin, which you can see on your screen there. It's that area that runs between Victoria and northwest Tasmania. We've got a number of proposals there, and you'll see all those acronyms, and trust me, the oil and gas industry runs on acronyms, so please, apologies from us, it wasn't our decision. We've got 2 seismic blasting proposals, which we campaigned hard on last year, it's been a long year. as well as a proposal for exploration drilling for new gas. And you'll notice from Adele's maps that they're overlapping marine parks. So seismic blasting is currently allowed in marine parks unless they're sanctuary zones. So that's part of the work we do with Adele, is highlighting the threats to marine parks, the fact that you can drill for oil and gas in marine parks if they're not sanctuary zones. You can seismic blast in marine parks unless they're sanctuary zones. So this really puts the impetus on how important it is we step up our marine protected areas to squeeze oil and gas out of our most precious areas of oceans. So I'll break these down for you a little bit because it's complex, it's overlapping, and I've only got 10 minutes. Seismic blasting. For those of you who've been following our work for the past year, you've probably seen us going and banging on, pardon all the puns, about these seismic blasting proposals in the Otway Basin. And that yellow splodge, orange on some screens, is one of the most egregious. This is a seismic blasting proposal by a mob called TGS Schlumberger SLB. It's a joint proposal, and it covers 45,000 square kilometres. It's the largest 3D seismic blasting proposal we can find on record globally. It's, as you can see, impacting 2 marine parks, and it has also been one of the biggest actions we've had in the past year at AMCS. So there's this process where companies go and make a plan, have to submit it to a regulator, and then we have this crazy 30-day window where people can make public comment to it. Back one step, please, on that slide. Thank you. So we did a response to this 3,000-page environment plan and then put it to our membership as part of an online action where they could also make their own submission. So the regulator got 30,000 submissions all up, which is massive. It's the second largest ever that Australia's regulator for oil and gas has got. And over 20,000 of those submissions were from AMCS supporters. So that was just, I think, one of the most wonderful first actions we could have had as a new campaign, which showed that our supporters really care, the community really cares, and it put these companies on notice that eyes are on them and they need to pick up the game. The second proposal, that little redder splotch, which everything looks small compared to the TGS proposal, is by a mob called CGG. They're proposing to do seismic blasting over critically important whale calving grounds for southern right whales. So Adele's talked a little bit about the values of these areas, but both of these areas cover habitat for over 30 species of cetaceans, including biologically important area for the pygmy blue whale, which has just, well, we're coming to the end of its season in this area now. And if these two companies get their way, they'll be out there seismic blasting 24 hours a day for months on end. And the impact of seismic blasting on our marine life is absolutely awful. From the foundation, when we're talking krill and zooplankton, research has shown that seismic blasting literally pulverizes these little guys. And this is the foundation of the food web. And then we go all the way up to the top of the food chain, coming to, our big charismatic megafauna, such as the pygmy blue whale, who rely on krill for food. So when you think about the whole ecosystem out here and what this is doing to it, there's no other way to really think of it than months and months of this blasting, which can happen over and over and over again, is destroying so much of our ecosystem and food web out there. You may have seen recently some photos of pygmy blue whales from the Otway Basin. Those images were taken just on the edge of this TGS area, showing 2 males and quite an underweight female engaged in mating courtship behavior, which has never been captured before. And that was by the blue whale study, a wonderful man called Dr. Pete Gill, who we work with and get advice from a lot. So this area is so important to our wildlife, and it's being opened up for more and more oil and gas exploration. Next slide, please. So we've found a little oddity in these seismic blasting proposals, in that they're using a very special type of permit that bypasses all the normal checks and balances that other oil and gas exploration have to do. They're called a Special Prospecting Authority, or SPA for short, and SPAs are only used for seismic blasting. Applicants are able to apply for them with an incredible speed and rapidity. As you can see in the writing there, applicants don't have to pass the fit and proper person test. So what that means is you can apply for a special prospecting authority. You don't have to show you've got the expertise to do it, whatever that expertise may be, the technical tools to do it. And well, you don't have to show you've got the money to actually cover any bills. And also you don't have to have a clean record. So you can be on charges for other breaches, such as the proponent TGSLB are, and still be able to apply for this permit. They cost $8,250, which is cheaper than a used car these days, and they only last 180 days. And you'll notice there it says each SPA is assessed in isolation. And where that's important is that the example of, say, this TGS SLB 45,000 square kilometre proposal, they can apply for multiple permits in the same project. So TGS have said they planned, we managed to slow it down, to start in October of last year and keep going to 2027. So you can imagine how many SPAs they will be wanting to apply for. And when you're applying for a permit, and each one is this goldfish bowl of an application of your past conduct is not considered, any breaches you may have done recently or in other projects is not considered, we've got a deeply problematic regulatory process. So AMCS is working really hard at the moment with numerous MPs and our community and supporters to put forward a private members bill to Parliament this year to abolish special prospecting authorities, because they are such cowboy permits. And every time we talk with a decision maker or anyone who knows anything about the industry and explain what an SPA is, how dangerous they are and how poorly regulated they are, and that there's the regulation for these and the checks and balances basically don't exist. We're getting a lot of feedback that the understanding is there of we need to clean up these cowboy seismic blasting permits to take out the worst of the worst operators. So these two seismic proposals in the Otway Basin are proposing to use an SPA, and Kim did some research for us, and we found that there's about 6 active proposals for SPAs. So not only would, if we get rid of these really dodgy permits, would we be slowing down the likes of TGS Schlumberger, we'd also be having an impact on proposals up in the northwest of Australia as well. So please, if you're interested in that, head along to our website. You can take action and put your name to this petition to Minister King, the minister responsible for the oil and gas industry, very much for the oil and gas industry, asking her to abolish these SPA permits. We're also working with Crossbench, especially the Teals, to develop a private members bill, which we hope to have presented to Parliament for a vote before the winter sitting break, which is in June. So we're on a short timeline because we want to get in before these projects are approved before NOPSEMA. Next slide, thank you. Now, I mentioned there was 3 projects live in the Otway Basin. One was for drilling, and this is by ConocoPhillips, a rather well-known international oil and gas giant. So ConocoPhillips last year, those are whales, we like those. ConocoPhillips last year put up a proposal for 2 areas of drilling, test drilling for gas, which you'll see are these dark little splodges, as you can see again, in marine parks. So in this plan, ConocoPhillips has said that they want to drill in 6 locations, but they're not telling us where. ConocoPhillips also gave information in this environment plan of what would happen if there was a spill or multiple spills from any of the proposed 6 undisclosed drill locations. And it's alarming. Their own information shows that spills from these areas would emanate throughout the southeast region. So we got some animations done based on their information to show where a spill of hydrocarbons from these test drillings will spread. So you can see over endangered blue whale feeding areas, southern right whale calving grounds, over to the west and the east, all the way up to Jarvis Bay and those incredible coastlines, and impacting World Heritage coastlines as well, from Tasmania and the World Heritage area. So this environment plan, which Kim led on developing the response to that, we put in to the regulator. It's now in a very strange process where it's being considered by the regulator. And we've got deep concerns that any day now, we could see the regulator approve the ConocoPhillips test drilling plan, which would then give the green light for this company to bring a floating rig down, which would then start punching holes in our ocean, looking for more gas. And as you saw in that map, also in marine parks. So this again really stresses the need for us to up the protection level of our marine parks, to stop oil and gas drilling and oil exploration in our marine parks. So we've got a little bit on right now. All three of these projects I've mentioned are before the regulator for consideration. So we're in a hurry up and wait of any day we could get a yes, we could say a no, but the regulator doesn't seem to say no, to move ahead with that. And then we need to spring into action with figuring out what grounds we have to challenge any approval based on the impacts to marine life and to our marine parks. So I'm trying to keep it to 10 minutes, noting that we've got questions afterwards where we can get to those. We've had a pretty busy year, and it's actually been a year since we started this campaign, and I started at AMCS. So I wanted to show you a little bit of the impact we're having with this super new campaign to AMCS, and focus entirely on the Southeast at the moment, because as Adele said, this is where the people live in Australia. So we've got a strategic approach as part of a national strategy where we're going to the places where the people are to show that there is no social license for oil and gas, to show the harm that it does to our marine life and of course climate, and to work with local communities to really push back on this expansion of oil and gas. And more to the point, we actually need to have an end to oil and gas. So we've had a fast and furious time. You can see some of the media we've generated in that time, from a whistleblower talking about their experience on seismic blasting boats in the Southeast, which really cracked the can open of people having that aha moment of it's out of sight, out of mind, and people working in this industry are told not to talk about it. Working with some wonderful community members all across the West Coast to draw a line in the sand on oil and gas. Excellent local governments who've said that they don't want to have their council in any way engaged with the offshore oil and gas industry, which is big when you're talking about, it's Colac and Warrnambool out those ways. It's a really big move. And then we really get to the hard politics of it. The past 6 months have been wild, of the government trying to ram through some really, really dangerous changes to laws and regulations, which the current one that has got our attention is the Minister for the Oil and Gas Industry trying to take more powers for approval, which normally would sit with the Environment Minister, into her portfolio for the next 12 months at least, to help fast track oil and gas exploration and approval projects. So we're up against it, but most importantly, we're up against it with some truly excellent community groups. And from the work that we've been doing over the past year, which Kim will talk more about it, we really are seeing the tide turning, and public sentiment on this issue is increasing. And the MPs that I'm talking a lot with at the moment are really feeling the pressure. One great example is a ALP backbencher in a marginal electorate almost on the surf coast of Victoria, recently wrote a letter to the regulator about that 45,000 square kilometre seismic proposal, and intervened, saying that the regulator needs to go back and stop we thought there was an approval coming fast because consultation was not properly done with the First Nations people, consultation was not properly done with local tourism operators, and local fishing industry have all said that seismic blasting will have seriously bad impacts on their fisheries based on previous experience. And you can see there, that little picture of the lobster buried down the below, is that we've got scientific research showing that seismic blasting disrupts lobsters' ability to function, to navigate, to right themselves, and damages their hearing. So the more we found out about seismic blasting, which is dangerously under-researched, the more harmful we understand it is. So I'm going to try and keep it to 10 minutes and leave it there, but please do use the Q&A section if you want to ask a question to any of us. And now I will pass over to my excellent colleague, Kim, to talk about all the work she's doing with community and everyone above and beyond.
Thank you, Louise, and hi, everyone. So happy to be here, and thank you for joining us. I am joining tonight from Bunurong country on the beautiful Mornington Peninsula in Victoria, and I'd like to pay my respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge that traditional owners all around Australia and around the world have been caring for land and sea country for millennia, and that they continue to do that important work to this day, often in the face of significant opposition from industry, including the fossil fuel industry. So on that note, I'm going to talk tonight about our community building work that we did over summer to elevate the profile of the oil and gas campaign. This summer was huge, simply put, for increasing community awareness around seismic blasting and the threats to our oceans from offshore oil and gas. We played a major role in the Great Ocean Rescue Tour, which was organized by a grassroots environment group in Apollo Bay called the Otway Coastal Emergency Environment Action Network. It's called Ocean. Let's just call it Ocean. The tour spanned 9 events in 3 weeks in towns all along the Great Ocean Road and as far west as Portland. We attended and supported public rallies, which you can see in the photo in the middle. We ran an action tent at several rallies, and that's the photo on the left, where we distributed our campaign collateral, we got people to take our actions, and we did lots of face-to-face engagement and awareness building to locals and visitors, because of course, there are loads of people from metropolitan Melbourne down in that part of the world at that particular time of year. The tour events also included film screenings of a film called Southern Blast, which was produced by Surfrider Foundation Australia, and it highlights the threat of seismic blasting and fossil fuels specifically in our Southeast oceans. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you do, and I really can't overstate the impact that this film had on crowds. People honestly left the screenings completely fired up, came up to us afterward and wanted to know what they could do to help. I spoke at these screenings, as you can see in the photo on the right, giving more in-depth information on seismic blasting. What is it? How it works? Why do we do it? Its impacts on marine life, and also what AMCS is doing to stop it. And now, talking about complex, technical, detailed subjects, like physics, decibels, sound propagation, it can be risky, and you can appreciate that can put people to sleep sometimes, but we actually found in these events that it was the complete opposite. People really are shocked by seismic blasting, and once they learn about it, they want to learn more. And AMCS, at AMCS, we really are the ones bringing in the science and giving people that information and a level of detail that just hasn't been done before. And the response at the events was really incredible. I was actually running Q&A sessions at the film screenings, and the questions just kept coming, and eventually we had to stop because we were running out of time to show the film itself. But it was great to see that people were so engaged with this quite difficult topic. And the events really did tell us that communities across Victoria are paying attention, and they're ready to take on the offshore oil and gas industry, which is no small feat. Next slide, please. A couple of weeks after the Great Ocean Rescue Tour, we turned our focus to metropolitan Melbourne. And what better way to engage people over summer in Melbourne than with a festival? We had a stall at St Kilda Festival, which attracts around 400,000 people each year. And honestly, and I think Louise can attest to this, it felt like all 400,000 people came to our stall. We did not stop all day. And as you can see in the first photo, we had a constant queue of people at the front. I actually had to crop people out left and right of this photo to make it fit, but people were going into the road and causing little mini traffic jams. So at the stall, people took multiple actions for abolishing SPA permits and for making a submission to the seismic blasting project by CGG, which was open at the time. And if people took both of those actions, they got to go on our prize wheel for a chance to win some amazing AMCS merch. We were also very excited that our whale mascot, Bailey, made its debut at St Kilda Festival. The name is in reference to whale's baleen, and also the Latin name for the blue whale, Balenoptera. You can see Bailey in the photo on the right with one of our volunteers, George, getting people to sign our SPA action. Bailey was a huge hit at the festival. People came over for a photo, but they stayed to take our actions. And Bailey will continue to be a fixture at our public events and a recognizable campaign mascot that will wind up in the media and maybe even Parliament. Watch this space. And in case you were wondering, yes, that's me wearing the whale. And yes, it's very warm in there, but it's also a lot of fun. Next slide, please. Okay, I wanted to put this up to show you that our presence in the community isn't just fun and colorful. It's not all prize wheels and whales, but it's actually converting into concrete action to protect our oceans. After St. Kilda Festival, we made another push to our supporters to sign our CGG action. And within that very short time frame, we got a whopping 16,700 signatures in total, which was well over our expectations. And it really does show that people are really engaged on the topics of seismic blasting, whales, marine life, and protected areas all in one. Next slide, please. And our final summer event was running an action tent at a paddle out in Torquay in partnership with our friends at Surfrider. Over 1,200 people turned up to the paddle out, which we have been told has set a new world record for paddle out attendance, which is pretty cool. This event came on the heels of the news that the monster seismic blasting project by TGS had been delayed and that politicians and the public had spoken up in opposition to the project. We also brought along our selfie frame, which you can see from the photos that people loved interacting with. This is just a small selection. We have heaps more photos, and it really shows how excited people were to be there and to be taking action against seismic blasting. And if you'll look carefully, you'll spot Bailey in the top left corner. We also ran an action tent, similar to what we did for the Great Ocean Rescue. I now run a monthly action group in Melbourne. We call it the action group because each meeting we do something concrete, whether that's writing a letter to the editor about offshore oil and gas or calling MPs' offices. And we've had quite a few people who were at the paddle out who have since joined and attended the action group. So overall, it's been an amazing summer, and I'm really proud of how we've elevated awareness of offshore issues in the community. Next slide, please. And now I want to invite you to join me on what promises to be an incredible adventure. I'm so excited. Next slide, please. So from the 13th to the 19th of October of this year, I'm going to be joining the Great Ocean Walk Challenge. We will be walking 100 kilometers from Apollo Bay to the 12 Apostles, passing through some of the most iconic landscapes in Australia. This is honestly just such a special place. It's where the Southern Ocean meets gorgeous beaches, limestone cliffs, mountain ash forests, and it's a place where you're totally immersed in unique marine and terrestrial ecosystems at the same time. There really isn't anywhere quite like it. And while we're on our walk, we will be raising vital funds for marine conservation so that we can continue our work to protect these wild places and hopefully keep them wild for a very long time to come. If you would like to know more, either for yourself or as a gift for a friend or a loved one, there is a QR code on your screen there. And I believe our fundraising team will circulate an email with more details after this. And on a personal note, I've been wanting to do this walk in its entirety for a long time, and I'm very excited to finally be doing it. And like for work, how good is that? So if you have also been itching for an adventure for a while, like me, then I hope you take this as a sign that it's time to have one. And I hope to see you on the trail. And with that, I'm going to pass back to Darren. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Many thanks, Kim. And I can reassure everyone that Kim holds a place of high jealousy amongst many of her staff, but she gets to go on that amazing walk. It's also on my bucket list. I'm not yet down to join in October, but I could pull a few strings, pull a bit of rank, but let's see how we try. But I would encourage people, it's going to be an incredible adventure, as Kim said, in one of the most special parts of the world. So look, we're going to have Q&A shortly. Phil's been monitoring the Q&A online here, but offline, I think people may have been sending some questions through too. But I would just like to thank our speakers again. So Adele, who runs our Marine Parks campaign, has been around with AMCS over many years and has championed our work in the Northern Territory. There's not many people working on marine conservation in the Territory, and not many that have had that sort of that staying power there. And Adele really is a champion for marine protection there and around our coasts. So from our longer-serving staff members to our newer ones, and just the impact that Louise, as a manager of our oil and gas campaign, has had, and Kim, driving that engagement with the community that you've seen in such a short period of time, it's really impressive. And as I said earlier, we need to have our ambition that steps up to meet the scale of the challenges. And from a campaign we've been looking to start for many years, and only just really started last year, to the stage now, all those events, the media coverage, the leverage we've had in terms of at least delaying some of these disastrous decisions. Seismic in critical habitat for blue whales, it's just insanity, but they've had a real impact. And so I'm super proud of these guys, of a team as a whole, because we have many people across all of our work, our campaigns, our fundraising, but pull together to help better protect our ocean. So look, thanks folks for your presentation. Phil, I know you've been looking at the Q&A, so are there any questions for our panel? And I guess I'm including myself in the list of panelists if required.
Thanks, Darren. Yes, we've got a few questions, both online and offline. It's been our experience that when we run these events, people get quite embarrassed about posting an online question, so I tend to get my phone running hot, which is great. I also just want to say it's such a privilege for me to be working alongside these amazing colleagues. People often ask me, as part of my job, I'm a fundraiser, so how do you ask people for money? The answer is I don't ask people for money. I just ask them to listen. That's all I ask them to do. Just listen to the stories and to the science and to the research and to the passion of the people that I'm privileged to work with. And I hope you enjoyed that. So let's get to some questions. I'll do the ones on the Q&A list first. I've got at least 6 or 7 on offline as well. So the first question. A great question. Why does there seem to be such an uptake in oil and gas prospects at this time when conservation seems most critical?
Oh, look, I'll take that one. I think that's actually the golden question when we look at the biodiversity crisis unfolding in our oceans, the climate crisis, and all the intermingling there. And yet, we know that ending oil and gas is the most immediate and important thing we can do. And we're just seeing an explosion on exploration for some, frankly, pretty, loose prospects, such as that in the Otway Basin, and then some horrendously dangerous ones up in the northwest near where Adele is. Bringing it back to, I'm just going to get a little bit politics because that's sort of my job. We've got a scenario at the moment where the Australian government and the opposition are pretty well sponsored by the oil and gas industry, and looking at the legislative processes at the moment, they seem to be reflecting more of what the offshore, in my work bubble, oil and gas industry wanting rather than conservation. We've got our national nature laws being reviewed and drafted and redrafted at the moment, and that's just been put on ice and put on hold and doesn't seem to be strengthened. So we've got a serious issue where the fossil fuel industry has outweighed influence in our political decision-making processes, and nature, our oceans and climate seem to be not even a third-order consideration. And this really comes back to the work that we're doing, what Kim and I are doing, and Adele as well, because Adele and our work is so intertwined, is that we need to show so clearly to the decision makers that the social license for not just new offshore oil and gas, but oil and gas as a whole is gone. And the time for real climate action and ocean protection is imminent. And we've got a federal election coming up. And you may have kind of read between the lines when I was talking about our Southeast work and where all the people are. We're working hard on marginal electorates to show that people's votes will move with the parties or the independents who will show real action to protect our oceans from these offshore oil and gas expansion. And part of that also includes increasing marine protected areas to make sure that you can't seismic blast and you can't drill in a marine park. Because, when you think about it, marine park, you'd consider it protects from something. Frankly, not doing what it says on the box at the moment. So there's mine. I'll get off my soapbox, but thanks for the question.
You might not be let off the hook regarding the soapbox, because I've got a feeling that the next question has partially been answered. So if you could just segue to that, which is, why is the Southeast so underprotected, but is so full of life and richness? Why doesn't our government do more to protect this area? And as I said, I think you probably may have partially answered.
There might be one for Adele.
Yeah, I think Adele can address that really well.
Yeah, so that's Louise has talked to part of that problem. For the marine parks and their limited coverage of only 8% in fully protected areas, I think there's two things going on. One is a matter of age. The parks were set up in 2007, and since then, our understanding of the values of the area has increased so much, but also our understanding of the threats in the area has increased so much. And there is now scientific consensus that we need to protect at least 30% of our oceans in fully protected areas if we're going to maintain the health of our oceans. So that's the goal that we're working towards. The second part of the answer is similarly to Louise, we are up against some powerful players in this part of the world. The oil and gas industry is one, but also the commercial fishing industry as well. So there's a lot of pushback from those stakeholders who have other interests in the area. And we know that, you know, the community of Australia is certainly for protecting our oceans, and it is our job to make sure we amplify the voices of Australians so that our decision makers hear that and greatly increase the protections as is required in line with science.
Thanks, Adele. I see that there's a third one online. I'm just going to go to an offline question, and that's from actually another anonymous attendee. I won't say who it's from. Do we need more seismic blasting data since the oil and gas industry has been around for decades?
I feel like I might throw to Kim on this one because she knows this as well as I do.
Yeah, really, really good question. Thanks, Phil. The answer is, do we already have seismic blasting data? Yes, we have a ton of seismic blasting data. Seismic blasting has been happening since the 70s. And in the southeast oceans of Australia, it's been going on for most of that time. We have really big data sets. And, you know, it's worth acknowledging up front that technology advances over time. So oil and gas industries are leaning very hard on the excuse that they need to just continue blasting as the technology increases. But there's another component to this, and it's that seismic data is proprietary for at least 15 years. And when that data is acquired, it's then sold on the open market multiple times to oil and gas exploration companies or others. And that data is essentially locked away from other institutions, including the Australian government. So Geoscience Australia would have to pay for that seismic data collected in Australian waters if they wanted to, say, know a bit about the undersea geology, or they have to wait 15 years until the embargo is lifted and then they can use it. But then again, by then, the technology has changed, and then they make that case again that they need to reblast. So it's really it is the vicious cycle. But we have a ton of data about the Southeast. We don't need to keep doing it. And if the government was able to remove that embargo period of 15 years, we would know exactly what what the data showed, and we wouldn't need to keep acquiring it. It's essentially a fundraising exercise. No disrespect intended our amazing fundraising team, but it's a fundraising exercise for the wrong side for the oil and gas industry. So no, we don't really need any more, is the short answer.
Okay, thank you. I will get to that last one online after the next two. I've got a double barrel question from the same person here. One for Louise, one for Adele. Louise, do fossil fuel companies pay tax?
Oh, yeah, mostly no, actually. So it's a bit of a mixed bag depending on which companies you're looking at and which areas, but I can't think the stats off the top of my head. The Australia Institute did some excellent research showing that basically the fossil fuel companies, and I'm just going to talk offshore because there's a whole terrestrial one as well, get away with paying scant all tax. And we have a scenario where, you know, uni students are paying more tax than fossil fuel companies are. You get taxed more from your HECS. So we've got, you know, various systems, whether it's the petroleum resource rent tax and others, and the budget is coming on May 14. So we'll have another look-see in terms of how many R&D subsidies there are and other incentives for fossil fuel companies, whether it's in their exploration processes, their decommissioning processes. And now we've got the wonderful new boondoggle expanding in our oceans as well of carbon capture and storage, or as it should more appropriately be called, carbon pollution dumping, where companies, oil and gas companies, I should say, are now looking to dump carbon pollution under our ocean with massive subsidies, while also pitching that this is going to be an offset and their future for net zero, which means they also get more subsidies. And the real kicker on this, and I'm using this completely on my segue on CCS now, is that existing carbon capture and storage project in Australia, known as Gorgon, run by Chevron over in Western Australia, is actually underwritten by the government. So Chevron, with their Gorgon project, which is just north of Perth, if they, after the 15 to 25 years operating, scupper off and leave it, and it leaks and cracks as these things do, it is the state and federal government who picks up the bill, which means it's the taxpayer who picks up the bill. The oceans pick up the environmental damage. So not only are they not paying tax anywhere near what they should, considering the impact they're having, they're also getting massive subsidies and being underwritten by state and federal governments to keep on with business as usual. So it's a much bigger question than are they paying tax? It's, are we paying them with subsidies and all these other ways of supporting this ridiculous industry? And CCS is a whole other can of worms, which we don't have time, but one that really needs to be kept an eye on for our oceans.
Right. That's an answer. Okay. I will go to the online one here, this last one online. I saw your posts a while ago about the marine heat wave in this region. I'm really sad about the giant kelp forest losses. Can anything be done to restore these amazing forests?
Yes, it is devastating to see our kelp forests be decimated. Really important habitat, carbon sinks, you name it. It's marine heat waves that are having an impact, but there's also another cause of the problem. There's our lobsters in the southeast corner of Australia have been overfished, and it's the lobsters that predate on small, I guess it's like a crustacean. It's not a crustacean, sorry, for the scientists that are watching.
It's an urchin.
Centrus definus, it's called, is the scientific name. So it's a spiny urchin. And so what's actually happened is the lobsters have been overfished, taking away the predator of the spiny urchin, and the numbers of the spiny urchins have just exploded. And so they are decimating the kelp forest, essentially eating them away. So there's two compounding problems that are causing the decimation of the kelp forests. So on the one hand is the climate change impacts. And so, yes, we need to end our pollution of our atmosphere, bring down impacts of climate change. And on the other hand, stopping the overfishing of rock lobsters so that the ecosystem can get in balance and we don't have those urchins out of control and decimating the forests. There has been examples of kelp forests being reforested, people going out and planting baby kelp in the ocean bed, which is a job, but it has shown to bring back the kelp forests. There's a great little film, if you want to look it up, called Reviving Giants, and it tells a bit of this story. So I guess the moral of the story is, you know, we really need to keep an eye on overfishing. We can cause imbalance in our ecosystems, and we're seeing the flow-on effect of this as well. And kelp forests, like mangroves and seagrasses, we are going to see the impact on these habitat types from climate change. We have seen impacts, we're going to see increasing impacts, so we really need to get ahead of that and get the carbon out of our atmosphere to give them the best fighting chance. I'll also note that fully protected marine parks are one of the best tools that we have for supporting ecosystems to be resilient in the face of climate change. If you take away other impacts and other pressures, it gives these systems a chance to recover from events such as heat waves or coral bleaching. So they're a really good tool to apply.
That's a great answer, because you also answered the next question that came up on my text, which how can marine parks help with climate change impacts? I think you've just eloquently explained how that happens. It's 7:29. I'll do one more that I've got offline here, and I think it's back to you, Adele. Can you and I think it's quite a general question. Can you tell us about the overlap of the Southeast Marine Parks with the Great Southern Reef?
Sure, and I will try and be quick because I know we're at the end of our time. And there is increasing attention on Australia's Great Southern Reef in recent years. And the Great Southern Reef does run pretty much all the way across the south coast of Australia and around Tasmania, and it's showing signs of decline, and so we're needing to implement protections as quickly as we can for these Great Southern Reef. With the Southeast Marine Region and the Commonwealth Marine Parks, a lot of those marine parks are offshore, but there is overlap of those marine parks with some critical areas of our Great Southern Reef around Tasmania and the bottom of Victoria. So there is opportunities in the review of the Marine Parks Network to protect areas in the Great Southern Reef, but also at the western end of the country. Currently, at the moment, we're working on the WA South Coast Marine Park. It's a marine park which is 1,000 kilometres long, all the way from the South Australian border across to Bremer Bay. And that is a state-watered marine park, and it does encompass a lot of the Great Southern Reef. So that consultation is underway at the moment, and so we're working hard to make sure we get good protections in that South Coast Marine Park in WA. So yeah, our work has got a big focus on that Great Southern Reef and ensuring we get some good outcomes.
Thanks, Adele. And I think I'm going to wrap it up. If we just flick onto the next slide. Listen, I am a fundraiser. That's my job. My job is to actually ask for money, although at the Marine Conservation Society, as I mentioned earlier, my job really isn't to just ask for money, and I very rarely do this pitch. There is so much that our supporters do for us and with us. They take so much action on our behalf. They advocate on our behalf. They turn up at events. They sign petitions. They write letters. They take part in research. They provide us with research. We are so incredibly fortunate to have an amazing raft of supporters, and it's quite a luxury, really, for me to not have to ask for money all the time. And so I'll just merely point the fact that every year, World Oceans Day, we do our end of financial year a tax appeal, and luckily for me and for my team on the fundraising, we are very fortunate that we have anywhere from 150 to 300,000 active supporters who support us in this way. You can see what we do with your money. You can see the absolute excellence in terms of research and science and people that we have on the job that are saving the places we love. So and I'll leave it at that. I won't go any harder than that, other than to say thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting us in the work that we're doing to protect where we love. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.